Hi, this is episode number 42 of Gen X Amplified, and today this is a very special best of episode of the podcast because I am going to replay the very first interview and episode of Gen X Amplified, which is my interview with Mr. Chris Brogan. This is the chat that started it all. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
The whole Gen Xer crowd out there, you know, a lot of them, your life gets turned upside down, and next thing you know, you've left Philadelphia and you've moved on to California and Bel Air or something, and you're trying to figure out what to do.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another brand new episode, or actually I should say somewhat brand new episode of Gen X Amplified, the podcast and platform where it is my mission to empower and help Gen X leaders and mid-career professionals maximize our impact at work, in business, and life. As always, thank you so much for being part of my journey, this podcast journey, for subscribing and for listening to the show. Now, I kind of said kind of brand new because as you heard in the intro, I am doing a best of episode, and I wanted to take a step back and showcase the very first interview that I did. This was it. This was the beginning. I had never podcasted before. I had this mission. I had this platform that I wanted to launch, and this was it. This was the very first chat I had with Mr. Chris Brogan, who is currently the president of Chris Brogan Media. And I wanted to highlight that because, as you will hear in the original interview that I published a couple of years ago, the name of his company, which he still has, Owner Media Group, but it doesn't mention Chris Brogan Media, which is his new company that he uses when he works with bigger mid to large companies on marketing and customer experience and all of that great stuff and advisory services. So anyway, I just want to provide that little context. Also, before I replay the interview, I just wanted to provide some more insight into why I felt that this was special. Number one, obviously, this was a very special interview because this was the very first episode of the podcast. And also, as you will hear, he had some really great insights. And what was interesting, which I picked up during the interview, but it became more prominent after I listened to it, is that he slipped in some lyrics from the great theme song from Fresh Prince of Bel Air. He did, actually. When you hear it, you know it. But I thought that was really clever, and he made it applicable to our conversation about Gen Xers. But anyway, this was the very first interview, and very proud and excited and humbled, I should say, that you all stuck with me. You stuck with this podcast all this time, even after the relaunch a couple of months ago, I should say. And also, I must point this out, also you will hear probably my progression and my evolution, if you will, as an interviewer. Remember, this was the first one. So, you know, when you want to launch something, and this is good advice, when you want to launch something and you're not sure if you should launch, if you're ready or not, hey, just start. Just publish it. Just write that article, record that podcast, film that video, write that book, whatever it is, just start, because you will never be as good as you will eventually be when you first start. It just won't happen. So this was the first interview, and I've come a long way, but then again, I hope you enjoy it. Really great. This is special for me, and I wanted to showcase this and republish this, especially for the people that have probably just found Gen X Amplified and started listening recently, that may not have gone back all the way to the very first episode. So here it is, my full interview that I did with Chris Brogan. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gen X Amplified. This is Adrian Porter, and wow, I'm really excited about this episode. That's because my guest is someone who has inspired and influenced me, especially in this world of new media and business. He is a highly sought after public speaker, has consulted with some of the biggest brands in the world, including Disney, Coke, and some little internet startup you may have heard of called Google. His current mission is exploring how people use content and community to build marketplaces around areas of belonging, which I love that concept, and we're going to dive more into that. He is the CEO of Owner Media Group, a New York Times bestselling author of 8 books, but more importantly, he is a wonderful father of 2 children. I want to welcome my friend, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Chris Brogan. Chris, what's going on?
I am doing so well. So thrilled to be in this court, and I'm so excited to be talking to the whole Gen X Amplified gang. What a fun conversation we can have.
Man, we are excited to have you. And, I had the pleasure of meeting you a couple of months ago in March in San Diego at Social Media Marketing World. And I've been following you for many years. As I mentioned earlier, you directly influenced me when I jumped into the waters of entrepreneurship, especially in this new media space. I stumbled on your content posts. I love the overnight success video in the elevator, but we had a great conversation, and I found you to be one of the most humble and just generous people I've ever met in my life. So I'm excited. And you even had this crazy idea to mention me in your new blog post, like the next day we met, which again, I was beyond humbled and honored. So this is exciting for me.
Well, no, it's totally my pleasure. And I don't think I do a lot to earn much attention in the world. I have not slept at Skywalker Ranch. There's just many things that I haven't done yet in this world. So I'm just like a lot of people. I pay someone to put my pants on one leg at a time, just like a lot of people.
Okay. Did you hear that, everybody? No, but he's obviously just kidding. So let's get right into the meat. Now, we're talking about obviously our generation, Gen X, and my entire mission. Part of my mission is to really build up really the strength of this generation. And many Gen Xers are looking, as you know, to become better leaders, not only in the marketplace, but also at home and in their personal lives. They want to escape their 9-to-5 jobs or pursue an entrepreneurial path, but they're not sure how. Or they've already started businesses, but they really don't know how to tackle all this social media or content and all these tools and tactics. So I really want to explore further with you, Chris, the concept of belonging and how that relates not only to the pain points that many Gen Xers face, but also the opportunities that we have in front of us to take our lives to the next level.
Perfect.
So when you talk about belonging, let's say that someone is a 35-year-old person who works for corporate America, but they're really figuring out how to define their own personal story. How can someone dig in deep to make their brand known and really be able to attack these tools that they have in front of them to become a better leader?
Well, to me, with regards to branding, it's always about service. It's about what you do for others and how people perceive that. So, the whole Gen Xer crowd out there, a lot of them, your life gets turned upside down, and next thing you know, you've left Philadelphia and you've moved on to California and Bel Air or something, and you're trying to figure out what to do. Your next role is to figure out what really defines you. Are you the kind of the person who, plays basketball and gets into trouble, or are you the kind of person that has to go and live with relatives to make your life a lot better? And then how does that relate to other people? Are they going to start to understand you? Are they going to understand your perspective on things? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be that sort of fresh new voice that brings all that information in a way that they haven't heard it? And that's usually not so much about your story, but how people can relate to your story. Because when you look around your kingdom, you've got to know that, there's a distance between just the average person kind of being there and someone who could be the prince.
That's actually a great point. And again, it's like you said, it's all about defining, who you are and how people relate. And that, to me, ties really great with your most recent book, The Freak Shall Inherit the Earth, which I believe was released last year. And that was it, you said inspired by your kids? I think I remember you mentioning that
That is true.
Okay, Harold and Violet, I believe, correct?
Violette, a little more French and a little more fancy.
Violet. Okay, all right. Violet. So I want to make sure I pronounce that correctly. So when we think about Gen Xers, and even we'll dive in a little bit into millennials and boomers, but Chris, when we were coming of age and when we had the label of Gen X bestowed upon us, we were called literally the same things that the millennials are called now. We were called lazy, not really adaptable. And what I like to really underscore is that now, since we're between 35 and 50, we're now becoming the leaders. So when we think about the freaks shall inherit the earth and how we can influence the upcoming entrepreneurs, people that are starting businesses, like our children who are in fact maybe Gen Zs or some of the millennials, how does a Gen X leader like you be able to really encourage and influence, let's say, a millennial or a Gen Xer based on your experience? Like how can we become better leaders in doing that?
I always think, that the best leaders are servant leaders. And I think that the best servant leaders are the ones that show people as clearly as possible what the goal is and some idea of how to, find a path to it, but that don't actually define the path as clearly as humanly possible. I think that anytime that we are forced into a scenario where we're just having to follow scripts, that we're all going to fall down.
Right.
And I think any of those scenarios where we are put in a situation of leadership where we expect cookie cutter experiences, it's just not going to be pleasant for anybody. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, where that takes me is to, how do I show people where we're headed? How do I show them, some of the safety net stuff so that they don't fall off a cliff? And then how do I empower them to sort of bring their own color and flavor to it? I think that, in a world full of robots, all I really want to do is help people figure out a better way of making their story, a lot more connected.
Now, have you had, and I'm sure you have, but if you can dive in a little more, like just some of your own personal experiences when engaging with other generations? And I know that, you write a lot of content, you do a lot of speeches, you consult with many, not only solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and business owners, but I'm sure you have a lot of millennials per se that come up to you that are inspired by you. What are some of your personal stories or experiences that you've had when it comes to engaging, let's say, with some of these other generations and how you interact with them? And how
one of the things that I do, especially with, kind of younger generations than me, is, I say that we all have the same starting and ending points. It seems like we all think that, we know so much more than the people that are older than us. Right. And we think that all the older people feel like they know everything. And there's always that kind of brawl between fresh, young ideas and, crazy, old, established ideas. And I always say that the best way to be sort of a younger generation type is to remember that there's the best in both. Your new ideas are going to get you to a whole other place, but it doesn't hurt to hear the wisdom, to understand that wisdom, and to kind of sort of push out, what parts are going to be helpful. I think it's almost like we have to have, deep legacy learning and amnesia at the same time.
Right.
Because you can't create new things by following the past, but they always say that the past is doomed to repeat itself if you don't know anything about it. And I find that more people fail on that side than any other side.
No, that's actually really great. And I know that I had a conversation, I think last week, with someone, and we were talking about this whole concept of kind of the generational workforce and just in general. And we were discussing millennials and Gen Xers and even Gen Zs, and what not necessarily surprising to me, but I was talking to a millennial and they said that they actually are looking to be led, which may be contrary to a lot of opinions, that they really don't want to listen to Gen Xers or they don't care about their boomer parents, but they're really looking to be led. And I think what that does, that incentivizes people like us to make sure that we can further define like who we are and how we can really become a better leader to that millennial.
No, I agree. And one thing that I think this spans a lot of generations in my mind right now is that I think there's a lot of people out there who are looking for a lot more instruction than what used to be. I think we're looking for a lot more depth and understanding from other people instead of trying to reinvent everything ourselves. I guess that that makes it harder for innovation, but it also means that we can get a little faster towards, the good parts of stories.
Right.
And I guess my hope is that, I hope generations my age and older never try to label any particular generation, because, everyone who went through the 60s wasn't a smelly hippie. And, everyone who went through the 80s and 90s, wasn't just into hair bands and grunge, so it turns out that there's probably a lot of things that, you've got to calibrate for the people that are in front of you.
Now, that's funny when you said hair bands and grunge. Like, I was there when Nirvana totally dismantled, like, was it Poison?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really, in my mind, it sticks out in my head that it just seems like, literally in my head, it feels like Thursday night, we're all listening to like Welcome to the Jungle and Talk Dirty to Me and Round and Round. And then Friday, it Smells Like Teen Spirit and you're a bunch of stupid idiots if you have hairspray in your hair.
You said,
and literally, it just felt like that. It just felt like, oh my gosh, everything is different.
Right.
And very few other musical genres have such a clear delineating point. The British Invasion probably would be the only other thing that was like that, I think, in the history of music so far.
Right. You said Round and Round Rat. Wow, you kind of took me back there a little bit.
Our love will find a way, Adrian. Just give it time.
No, that's funny. And you actually brought up something too when it comes to like these labels. And that's one of the things that I struggled with or still struggle with, because I honestly, even though like this is part of my movement, if you will, or this podcast is called Gen X Amplified, I don't necessarily like labels, but I think there are some commonalities. And I think the important thing for all of us is to be able to work with each other and pull out all of our strengths together.
We hate labels, but we love flags. You know what I mean? We hate labels because we don't want to be labeled something, but we love to rally around something.
Right.
So I just think that it's a matter of that. So if we're going to amplify Gen X, then, the same kinds of people who probably know many more lyrics about McDonald's Happy Meals than they want, are going to have to band together. And I think that that's okay. I just think that what comes after that is where our individuality gets to color in the borders and edges.
No, that's true. And really amplifying Gen X. And you and I talked about this in great detail in San Diego. And what really drives me and a lot of people is, what I try to do is not necessarily when we have these generational conversations, or you may read an article, I'd say in the Wall Street Journal about millennials, and there are thousands of them that come out every day. A lot of them tend to belittle some of the other generations if they're talking pro-millennial. And to me, that bothers me. And what I try to do is do not tear down the millennials or the boomers or Gen Zs, but to build up the Gen Xers. And because of all the noise, and a lot of it's driven by big marketers who are looking to maximize their dollars and their target audience, they're talking a lot about millennials, which is important. I mean, keep in mind, they are 75 million strong, and they just surpass boomers. But there are a lot of the leaders that are in the workforce today and are driving innovation. A lot of them are Gen Xers. So, let's talk about them a little more, but also get into the next point, which I want to dive in deeper with you, is that many of the Gen Xers have kids that are Gen Zs, which are the next, I guess, focal point for a lot of these marketers. And for yourself personally, I know you have 2 kids we talked about earlier, and they're considered in that Gen Z generation. But their life and their experiences are so different, not only from ours, but even the millennials, correct? Just based on the tools and the digital experiences that they have.
Yeah, it's funny. 2 thoughts were in my head at the same time. One was that when we're done with Gen Z, what do we do? Start again at A? Like, it just seems...
It's Gen Alpha. That's the... they're going to start over with the Greek alphabet.
Oh, good. I like that. I think we just keep doing this until the end of time. We'll we'll start naming them like after bands. I don't know.
Right.
I think the whole concept, in regards to marketing to a specific generation and all that, one of the great things is that we have shared language. Right. I mentioned rat, and your head just went right down that hole. I think that there's just so many opportunities to use the tools that we have or whatever and see what's going on by way of putting that language in front of each other. And I love that, just because it strikes me as common language then gets us to a new place. Common language gets us to that place where, then we can all tackle what needs tackling. And I'm excited about that. So that's where I think it goes. That's kind of my hope.
No, it's mine too. And, being a father of myself of a 6-year-old who is this upcoming generation, again, what baffles me, and daily, anytime I interact with my son, Cameron, I look back at us when we were 6 years old, and we're talking about, 3 channels. All of our cartoon viewing watching happened on Saturday mornings between like 7 and 11. And all he knows inherently is there's a channel waiting for me whenever I want to watch it at any given time. Actually, a couple of channels, whether it's Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and he knows that he can access content whenever, wherever. So just the phenomenon of that really baffles me, but also what it does, it helps shapes me into how do I interact with this next generation. And I think for Gen Xers in general, because again, a lot of our children are this upcoming digital first generation, and they're going to be the leaders 20 years from now. And I think what's important is for the Gen X generation to really understand how can we continue to become, because we're directly influencing this next generation. And I definitely see that with you and your children. I mean, you write about your kids and they're wonderful and they have their own unique style. And I think that what you do as a leader definitely influences them, correct?
I would think. I mean, it's interesting because what I also think is that every child that I know tries their hardest not to be their parents. You know what I mean? So right. I think that, in my experience, what happens is, I spend my teens, my 20s, and even part of my 30s saying, there's no way I'm going to be anything like you, Dad and Mom. Right. And I'm totally them. I am, exactly my parents.
Really? Really?
Oh my gosh. My dad and mom were both radio DJs. They met each other because, they, worked at the same radio station. There's, endless crazy shenanigans involved in who they are and what they've added to my life. So, they're very social entities. They're very good, personable people. I owe a lot to them. So I could just tell you that, I think we all try to avoid being our parents, but really the other thing and by the way, some of us, I had awesome parents. So, that's kind of my storyline. If you've had really crappy parents, the other thing we tend to love to do is be the opposite of our parents if we can help it. and so to me, it just seems like, we're going to have an opportunity to do what we want to do with that information as well.
Now, your parents, they are literally like online, right? Like with websites. I believe you wrote a blog post about, unfortunately, like the hosting crashing or something like that, right?
Yeah, they got hacked really, really bad. So I put them over onto Rainmaker so that we wouldn't have to deal with that anymore. But they run a site called mompoppow.com.
Okay.
My dad runs social media for a variety of different Vegas gambling companies, and my mom and dad are both active on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and whatever. So yeah, they're pretty digital folks, not as typical in the baby boomer crowd.
Right. Now, and obviously that infiltrate came down to you, and then you're passing it down to your kids as well, because I know that again, I mentioned earlier, like your son, he's definitely into gaming, and I believe you just launched a post, I believe yesterday, about going to some conference, right?
Yes.
And he's really into gaming. And then your daughter, not too many. I rarely can stumble on videos where I see like a bright young girl discussing like Nelson Mandela African folktales over breakfast. But then I think about, well, look who her father is. So, I mean, I think that's amazing to me. And with that, like last night, I was watching TV with my son, and we were watching one of these, you may be familiar with one of these kid shows, Henry Danger, that comes on Nickelodeon. So we're watching Henry Danger, and given the world that we're in, and this is applicable to anyone that's looking to use new media tools and thinking about this next generation. One of the characters, I think his name is Jasper, he was launching a podcast in his home. This is on the episode. I'm literally like walking by the television, and my son's watching this, and I hear this dialogue. This boy who's 13 years old is launching a podcast in his home. And they were talking about, he had the whole rig set up with the laptop and the mic, and they were discussing fake downloads. Now, all of this dialogue on this show, my son's listening and watching this. And it's amazing to me that this will be his new normal. understanding what a podcast is at 6 years old, understanding digital downloads. There's Evan too, which my son can't stop watching for God's sake. So when we're thinking about, moving forward, I think it's amazing of what the generations have to, what's available to them and the tools that they have in place.
Well, think about Fred Seibert and what he brought to the networks that you used to work at, and then think about what's come since then.
Right.
And then think about the fact that mainstream TV still can't go as fast as YouTube.
Right.
And my kids have a really hard time sitting through traditional movies. Like I drag them to every movie I can.
Right.
But, it is amazing how they sit around bored as hell. And recently, we listen to a lot of Spotify in my world. And recently in the car, my son said, "Dad, can we please download SoundCloud? Can I show you some stuff on SoundCloud?" And I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. And he put on this music that was so different. It was all like, kind of fan-made music for different video game shows and things. What was interesting, Adrian, was that our songs, like think of even like Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley, which is used in a lot of jokes these days with Rick rolling.
Right.
That song takes like 45 seconds to get to the part where like things start happening. And most every song takes 40 or so seconds. Imagine like you're sitting with your friend and you put on music and you go, "Listen, I want you to hear this song." Mm-hmm. You really want them to hear like 40 something seconds into the song.
Right.
I noticed that my kid's music, my boy, the stuff he likes to listen to starts in less than 10 seconds. Like wow. It might launch immediately into the best part of the song. And I thought, how weird. Like I never think of music as changing a whole lot per se.
Right.
But instant gratification, Snapchat, 15-second Instagram, Vine, everything is saying, not that we have a short attention span. Mm-hmm. We want dessert first. We want the good stuff now. And I think that those are things that are generationally different that we're going to have to pay attention to. And the fact that anyone, with just a little bit of equipment, you don't even have to own it. You can just go to the library. You're gonna be able to make some interesting stuff happen. So it just strikes me as how slow the mainstream is and how fast the rest of the world is picking up.
Wow, no, you're right. You you mentioned Rick Astley earlier. I don't know if you heard, he just performed Uptown Funk, by the way. So
no.
Yes, he's been look online. He's been resurrected. He performed over the weekend, and I think it's his event called Let's Rock London. Uptown Funk, Bruno Mars. Rick Astley.
Wow, Let's Rock London. There it is.
Go figure. All right, so as we wrap up, there are a couple of questions I always like to ask my guests. And the first one is especially relevant to Gen Xers. What new media tool, Chris, or resource would you recommend to someone in this generation that's feeling stuck, that's looking to become a better leader, to really define their purpose and to really, take their life and business, whether they're a father or a parent or a business owner, to the next level? What specifically tool would you recommend when it comes to new media?
Well, specific to taking your business to the next level, I'm going to recommend a book. I'm going to say get Claudia Altucher's book, Become an Idea Machine.
Okay.
It's really easy to find online. Just type in Become an Idea Machine, all one word.
Okay.
And it is a book about how to come up with multiple ideas a day, every day, until your brain just works at this whole other level. So that's not a software. I can tell you that I use Evernote to stick all my Idea Machine ideas in.
Love it.
But that's going to help you be a better leader, because leaders think, leaders read, leaders take action and figure stuff out. And that book covers all of those.
Awesome recommendations. You're right. Leaders think, leaders take action. And I'm an Evernote junkie as well. And then the last, if there was a song that you would play when you walk into a room, your own personal theme song based on the essence of who you are and your personality, what song would that be?
My personal theme song would probably be 99 Problems, but maybe that's not a good one.
Oh, really? I like that.
I would probably do the Jay-Z and Linkin Park version just because it's even heavier, so it would be a lot more fun to walk in on.
Love that. Love the mashup. All right, Chris, so thank you so much. As we wrap up, please tell the audience what's the best way to find out more about you and how they can connect with you.
Oh, I'm easy peasy. Just go to chrisbrogan.com, and if you're willing, grab my newsletter. And the cool thing about my newsletter is you can hit reply and talk right to me anytime. So if you liked what Adrian and I talked about, then you're going to love hanging out with me.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to share your brilliance and being part of this movement.
My pleasure. Let's get those people amplified, Adrian. We need them.
All right. Cheers. Thank you. So that was it. The replay of the very first episode of Gen X Amplified, featuring my great conversation with Chris Brogan. Awesome chat. Great guy and all around Gen exceptional leader. And I'll be doing more of these. Just cherry picking some of our most popular episodes and playing them, replaying them, and reposting them for you, especially for those of you who have just discovered Gen X Amplified and may not have had a chance to go back and listen to all of our great conversations with our exceptional Gen Xers and leaders and thought leaders and influencers and people that just have great, compelling stories to empower you. So again, please go to our website at genxamplified.com and you can find Gen X Amplified on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Again, I'm your host, Adrian Porter, and you've been listening to Gen X Amplified, the personal brand development podcast dedicated to empower you to maximize your impact at work, in business, and in life. And remember, as always, this is more than a podcast. This is a movement. Take care.